Before there was Doctor Strange, before Marvel dreamed of sanctums and Sorcerer Supremes, there were real men and women across the vast lands of Africa, who commanded spirits, walked through dreams, and bent reality itself. In the villages of the Congo, in the sands of Egypt, and the mountains of Ethiopia, they were called by many names: Nono, Babalawo, Inyanga, Okamfo, Dibia. But to the rest of the world, they would be known as sorcerers. And some say, these sorcerers were the real inspiration behind the world's most mysterious heroes. Men like Dr. Stephen Strange, the master of the mystic arts. In Africa, magic was never fiction. It was woven into daily life. The rhythm of the drum, the symbols painted on the skin, the whispers carried in the smoke of burning herbs. While Europe feared witches, Africa revered the mystic. The sorcerer was a bridge between the living and the unseen. The Doctor Strange studies in Kamartaj, a hidden monastery in the east. But centuries before him, there were temples in Africa that served the same purpose. Sacred schools of mystical wisdom, hidden deep in mountains and forests. In the kingdom of Kush, priests of Amun practiced what they called Hika, the original word for magic itself. Hika was not trickery, it was the science of divine speech. The ability to command energy through the power of words. They believed every word carried vibration, and that with the right tone, one could open portals, heal the sick, or summon spirits from the afterlife. Sound familiar? In Marvel's world, Strange bends reality with sacred chants. But in Africa, this was done long before, with the ancient language of the gods. In the rainforests of Central Africa, the Congo people told of men known as Nono. They were healers, seers, and masters of spirit manipulation. But among them, there was one whose story still haunts the shadows. Mbumba Zinga, the sorcerer who commanded the spirits of the dead. It is said that Mbumba could separate his soul from his body, traveling into the Mpemba, the white realm of spirits, to speak with ancestors and retrieve secrets no mortal should know. He did this by sitting before a mirror of water, his body painted white with ash, his mind emptied of fear. When he entered trance, his body grew cold, his eyes turned white, and he walked the lands of the dead. In one story, the king of Congo fell ill, cursed by an unseen force. The healers failed, the priests wept, but Mbumba went beyond. He entered the spirit world, fought the shadow that had tied itself to the king's soul, and returned with a chant of power. When he awoke, he spoke that chant, and the king opened his eyes. This was no mere tale. To the Congo, the Nono was a doctor of the unseen, a surgeon of souls. Does that not sound strange? Far to the northeast, in the highlands of Ethiopia, tales tell of Tuadros the timekeeper, a man who could fold time through sacred geometry. In an ancient monastery hidden in the Simeon Mountains, monks guarded scrolls that spoke of the Book of Light. This book, it was said, could bend the flow of time itself, allowing the reader to glimpse past and future alike. Tuadros, a scribe obsessed with knowledge, spent 40 years learning the sacred alphabets of creation, each symbol a vibration of the universe. One night, during a solar eclipse, he performed the forbidden circle of the lion. As the sun and moon aligned, the shadows around him began to move backward. He looked through the mirror of obsidian and saw himself, as a child, as an old man, as dust. He understood then what few ever do. Time was not a river, it was a spiral. Marvel fans will remember Doctor Strange's Eye of Agamotto, the artifact that controls time. But the real concept of time manipulation was born in Africa. Among the Dogon, time was cyclical. Among the Egyptians, it was divine order, Ma'at. And among the Ethiopians, it was an illusion only the enlightened could break. Tuadros disappeared after that eclipse. Some say he entered the mirror, others say he still walks between seconds. Doctor Strange studied time. Tuadros became time. But perhaps the most mysterious of all were the sorcerers of the West. Those who served the secret order of the eyes. They were said to exist across the lands of the Yoruba, the Igbo, and the Fon. They believed that true sight was not with the eyes, but the spirit. One such seer, known as Okeke the Silent, was said to have seen the world's creation in a single breath. Okeke could close his eyes, enter trance, and project his spirit across villages, to spy, to teach, or to heal. In the astral plane, he met beings of pure energy, luminous, shapeless, but wise. He once warned his people of an approaching war. By describing the shadows of enemies he saw marching, days before they arrived. The people believed him to be mad, until the war came. Today, Marvel calls this astral projection. Africa called it Onimuo, one who walks with spirits. In fact, the Dibia of the Igbo people were often said to exist in two forms at once. One physical, one spiritual. Just like the Sorcerer Supreme. They healed by speaking to ancestors. They protected their people through sacred sigils, chalk patterns, and enchantments. And they guarded their temples from outsiders with illusions. Veils of invisibility made from herbs and chants. Even Doctor Strange's Sanctum Sanctorum echoes the old African idea of a spiritual fortress. A house hidden by power, guarded by ancestors. Now, you might ask, did Marvel know these stories? When Stan Lee and Steve Ditko created Doctor Strange in the 1960s, they drew from mysticism, from theosophy, from Buddhism and Egyptian lore. But under those layers, you find the same heartbeat that has echoed in Africa for millennia. The idea that words can change reality, that time can be reversed, that souls can travel beyond flesh, and that wisdom is the true source of power. These are not new. These are African. Look at Strange's Cloak of Levitation. In the Congo, shamans wore garments woven with charms to allow their spirits to fly. Look at the Eye of Agamotto. In Yoruba IFA divination, the opal chain serves the same purpose. To open the eye between worlds and reveal hidden truth. Even the Sanctum's window, that circle of light, resembles the Adinkra symbol and Saroma, meaning child of the heavens. A reminder that humans are connected to divine order. So perhaps Doctor Strange was not created from imagination alone. Perhaps he was a reflection of something older. Something that began under African skies. One final lesson remains, the mirror. Every myth is a mirror held to the listener. If you see only spectacle, you learn nothing. If you see yourself, you awaken. The elders said, the eye that looks outward dreams, the eye that looks inward awakens. They carved that saying above doorways, so that anyone leaving the village would remember to return to their own heart. Doctor Strange's true journey is the same. From arrogance to insight, from mastery to service. The African circle ends where it began. The healer heals himself by healing others. Now the drums of the ancestors fade into daylight. The circle closes, not in ending, but in renewal. The stories of Africa do not ask to be believed. They ask to be remembered. Each myth is a pattern for thinking. A reminder that mystery is the oldest teacher. When you listen, when you breathe with the rhythm of your own pulse, you step into the same circle that carried the first storytellers across ages. You, too, become part of the continuum. Eternity is not far away. It is here, in the pause between words. In the moment you choose compassion instead of control. In the space where imagination and memory shake hands. So the next time you watch circles of light well around a sorcerer on a screen, remember the older circles drawn in dust, in song, in dance. They, too, were portals. Not to other dimensions, but to deeper understanding. The circle of eternity never ends. It only invites new voices to continue the rhythm. Tell someone the story, and the circle lives again. They say the earth we see is only one of many. That beyond the veil of reality lies a web, a multiverse of endless worlds. Doctor Strange calls them dimensions. But the ancients of Africa called them realms of shadow and light. And long before sorcerers from the West began bending space and time, African mystics had already crossed between these realms, mastering what they called the forbidden arts. These arts were not forbidden because they were evil, but because few could survive their knowledge. In the heart of ancient Mali, among the cliffs of Bandiagara, the Dogon people spoke of the Namo, beings of light who came from beyond the stars. But the Dogon elders also told of the Bay, those rare ones who could travel to the Namo's world through dreams. The Bay were dreamwalkers. By lying in sacred caves, wrapped in white cloth and painted with ochre, they would send their spirits beyond the body. To them, the world was not a globe, but a lead spiral. Each spiral held a version of reality, a reflection slightly different from the next. And in the deepest spiral lay Kanaga, the shadow realm, where every thought, every fear, every possibility existed all at once. Few returned from there unchanged. One Bay named Keen, driven by grief for his dead wife, crossed into Kanaga seeking her soul. He found her, but she had become light itself. When he returned, his eyes glowed for 7 days. The elder said he had seen the architecture of the universe, and lost his human sight in exchange. Marvel's Doctor Strange calls this the mirror dimension, but to the Dogon, it was the shadow of God, where destiny rewrote itself with every breath. And so, the multiverse was not a fantasy. It was an inheritance. Far south, in the ancient Ashanti kingdom, legend speaks of the Abasumfu, priestly guardians of sacred mirrors. They believed mirrors were not for vanity, but for crossing. Each mirror was crafted under the night of no moon, mixed with crushed gold dust and palm oil, so that the surface would not reflect the body, but the spirit. The most powerful of these was called Nsuo Suma, Water of Souls. Only the highest priest could touch it, and only when the ancestors called his name through thunder. It is said one priest, Adu Boahen, known as the Keeper of the Glass ***, once fell into trance before Nsuo Suma, and his reflection reached out to him. They say he walked into the mirror, and another Adu walked out. The new Adu spoke with two voices, his own, and that of an ancient spirit. He healed the sick, stopped wars, and spoke prophecies that came true years later. When he died, the mirror cracked, and bled. The priests locked it away, fearing that the barrier between realms was thinning. Doctor Strange would call this a dimensional rift. The Ashanti called it the meeting of reflections. They believed every person had not one destiny, but two. One that walked the earth, and one that waited in the mirror. In the lands of the Igbo, long before missionaries arrived, there lived a Dibia named Obioma Nwoke, the man who split the sky. Obioma was said to possess an object made from the bones of a thunderbird, a rod that could open the sky door. When the people of Nsukka suffered a drought, Obioma climbed the sacred hill of Ugwek and raised the rod to the clouds. The heavens opened, and rain poured for 7 days. But something else came down with the rain, glowing spheres of light that hovered over the hilltop. The villagers fled in terror. But Obioma stood firm, speaking an ancient incantation known only to the Dibias of old. It was said the spheres revealed to him 7 worlds laid upon the earth, each vibrating at a different frequency, and in each world existed another Obioma, making a different choice, living a different fate. When he returned, his hair had turned white, his shadow no longer followed him, and his eyes reflected storms. In modern language, Obioma had glimpsed the multiverse. He had seen himself across infinite possibilities, and learned that power was simply awareness. After that day, he spoke no more. He drew circles in sand, patterns of light that no one could decipher. When he died, lightning struck his grave, but there was no body. The elders said he had stepped into the storm, merging with his other selves. Doctor Strange travels through the multiverse of madness. Obioma became it. Every culture on Earth tells stories of magic. But Africa's stories describe systems of power, laws of energy, that align eerily with quantum theory and modern metaphysics. What the world calls fantasy, the ancients of Africa called memory. When the ancients spoke of power, they did not mean lightning from the sky or fire from the hands. They meant the power to perceive. The real forbidden arts were arts of consciousness, ways to expand the human mind until it touched the rhythm of creation itself. Across the Sahel, travelers once told of 9 hidden sanctuaries carved into rock. The people called them the temples of thought. Each temple taught a different discipline of reality: sound, breath, rhythm, geometry, color, number, motion, and stillness. Students sat for years before a single symbol, learning to listen rather than to look. They believed every vibration carried information, and that the one who truly heard could heal, teach, or foretell. The Ethiopian monks called it Semina Awaki, the seed of understanding. Doctor Strange opens portals with circles of fire. The African masters opened portals within the mind. To them, enlightenment was travel. Not through space, but through perception. But wisdom, once discovered, always tempts the proud. Legends speak of a generation who used those teachings for dominion. They learned to bend people's beliefs, not with illusion, but with story, rewriting memory to control history. This is the tale the Griots call the War of the Realms. Not a clash of gods, but of ideas. One side sought harmony, the keepers of balance. The other sought control, the architects of form. The war was fought through art, language, and dream. Wherever the architects conquered, temples fell silent, and people forgot the true names of things. The keepers hid their knowledge in symbols, in drums, in dance, in proverbs, in cloth. They said, when the world forgets, rhythm will remember. Centuries later, fragments of those rhythms appear in every corner of Africa. In the pulse of the talking drum. In the spiral of Adinkra. In the geometry of mosque and masque alike. Each fragment, a key. Each beat, a memory. Each song, a doorway back to the realm of awareness. Throughout Africa, whispers remain of those who still practice the old ways. In Benin, they speak of the Okomfo Anoki, who could summon lightning from the sky and command it to strike his enemies. In Mali, griots still chant the names of sages, who could summon ancestors with the beat of the drum. And in Nigeria, deep in the forests of Nsukka, it is said that a secret lineage of Dibia continues to guard the mirror of spirits, a relic that reveals truth to those brave enough to look. Perhaps this is fantasy. Or perhaps, like Doctor Strange himself, truth hides behind illusion. Either way, Africa's mystics live on, not in comic books, but in the very breath of its people. So next time you watch Doctor Strange open portals of fire, remember the Nono who opened gateways to the spirit world, the Ethiopian who bent time with mirrors, and the Dibia who walked the astral plane before science had a name for it. They were the real masters of the mystic arts, the true guardians of sacred knowledge. And their power still lingers. If you believe Africa's stories deserve to be heard, then share this tale, join the tribe, and subscribe, because next time, we'll journey even deeper into the shadows of forgotten kingdoms and the secrets that inspired the world's greatest myths. The past is not gone. It waits for those who can see. All things move in circles. The sun rises and returns, the seasons breathe in and out. And every life weaves itself back into the pattern from which it came. The ancients of Africa called this rhythm eternity. Not endless time, but perfect balance. Doctor Strange speaks of infinite loops and temporal spells. The sages of the Nile, the Niger, and the Limpopo spoke instead of continuance. The understanding that what begins in thought completes itself in experience. In the Sahel there is a proverb, when the drummer changes rhythm, the dancer becomes something new. The great teacher said the same of creation. Every vibration is a drumbeat, every form, a dance. To live wisely is to listen for the next rhythm before it arrives. They built great drums called koramu, carved from trees older than memory. Each side of the drum was tuned to a principle, order and possibility. When struck together, they reminded the listeners that opposites complete one another. To the philosophers of Timbuktu, this was not music but mathematics. The earliest study of waves, frequency, and resonance. They believed harmony was evidence of truth. A dissonant note meant misunderstanding between mind and matter. Doctor Strange draws circles of fire to realign dimensions. The African drummer draws circles of sound to realign hearts. Both seek resonance, the moment when chaos yields to pattern. In the monasteries of ancient Nubia, monks studied NFU, the science of breath. They observed that breath carries intention. Anger makes it sharp, compassion makes it wide. From this they reasoned that the world itself breathes, expanding and contracting through ages. They wrote a single line on a parchment that survives in oral form even now. He who masters his breath masters the movement between worlds. To them, worlds meant states of mind, fear, peace, curiosity, awe. A sage was one who could travel between these states without losing balance. When modern physicists speak of expanding universes, they unknowingly echo that same intuition. Existence inhales and exhales, endlessly creating space for new possibility. The circle of eternity is the breath that never ends. In the forest kingdoms of the south, storytellers taught children that day and night are siblings. Neither wins, neither loses, each returns in turn. They said enlightenment is not the banishment of shadow, but the understanding that shadow defines the shape of light. To walk the circle is to accept contrast. Joy and grief, gain and loss, faith and doubt. The elders compared it to weaving a basket. The dark reeds strengthen the bright ones. Doctor Strange faces darkness to preserve light. The old teachers said, you cannot guard dawn without knowing dusk. Their lesson was psychological, not magical. The mastery of fear through comprehension, not control. Thus, what others called sorcery was simply deep self-knowledge. Every myth hides a map of the mind. In the philosophies of Ifa and Kemet, the human being was viewed as a miniature cosmos. The head was the sky, the heart the sun, the stomach the earth. and the breath the wind that moved them all. To build a shrine was to build attention. To keep it clean was to keep thought clear. The sanctum existed not in buildings but in awareness itself. Marvel shows strange guarding sanctums across continents. The African thinker guards one within, the space between thought and action, where decision is born. In that stillness, they said, a person meets the Creator not as supplicant but as reflection. To recognize that meeting is to complete the circle. An old legend from the Great Lakes tells of a traveler who climbed every mountain seeking the voice of God. At the last peak he found only silence and a small seed gleaming on the ground. A voice within whispered, "Plant it where you stand." When he did, the seed burst into light and became the night sky. He realized the journey had been inward all along. The elders used that story to teach that enlightenment is the recognition of connection. Every life a spark from the same fire. Modern astronomy says the same, that every atom in our bodies was forged in ancient stars. The African traveler had already told the tale, in metaphor. The circle of eternity closes there, the self discovering itself in everything. And so the philosophers of Africa and the mystics of fiction meet in the same truth. Wisdom is perception refined by compassion. Magic is only a word for understanding too deep for fear. When the elders spoke of eternity, they never meant forever. They meant wholeness. What you do returns. What you forget is reborn until remembered. And what you understand becomes light that needs no sun. Across Africa, this knowing shaped everything. The way a potter traced a spiral into wet clay. The way dancers turned counterclockwise at the end of a festival. The way storytellers began their tales with silence. So listeners could travel backward through time before hearing a word. Every gesture was a rehearsal for balance. That is the real mystery. Not fire from fingers, but peace from insight. Scholars in Mali once asked, who first told the world its story? The griots answered, the world told itself. Sound became matter, and matter learned to echo. That echo is what you call memory. Dr. Strange bends time to revisit moments. The sages of the Niger Delta did so with words. Each proverb was a doorway, each song, a circle that returned to its beginning. When an old griot repeated a line 3 times, he was not forgetting, he was folding time. He reminded the listeners that the present moment is layered. Inside it live the ancestors, the unborn, and the yet to be imagined. The griot's voice was the first multiverse. Each tone a timeline, each pause a portal. In Yoruba teaching, names are small spells of memory. To speak a name correctly is to restore harmony between person and purpose. That is why parents spent days listening to dreams before naming a child. When you call yourself by a name with intention, you re-enter the story you were meant to tell. The ancients called this oriki, praise poetry that reminds the soul of its design. So when a healer whispered a name during illness, it was not an incantation. It was a reminder, remember who you are. Modern psychologists call this identity reinforcement. Quantum theorists call it observation collapsing possibility into form. The elders simply called it truth. At night, circles of students sat around flame. The teacher would draw a line in the dust and ask, what separates fire from shadow? When no one answered, he erased the line. Then learn, he said, that knowledge begins where division ends. This was the African paradox of power. Power that joins, not rules. To master the elements was to understand cooperation. Wind feeds flame, earth holds ember, water cools ash. And together they prepare soil for new life. Strange glowing sigils are circles of understanding. The teacher's line in dust was the same geometry drawn in humility. Among the Akan there is the legend of Adwoa the Weaver. She was no sorcerer, but a mathematician of threads. Her Kent designs carried equations of harmony, ratios of color and line that mirrored cosmic balance. Elders said her loom hummed with the same frequency as the stars. When asked why she wove endlessly, Adwoa replied, because reality itself is cloth, and every thought is a thread. Modern physicists would call it the fabric of space-time. The ancients already wore it on their shoulders. Her teaching spread quietly. To weave is to understand cause and effect. To unweave is to forgive. Dr. Strange bends space into circles. Adwoa bent meaning into pattern. By the coast, scholars preserved a proverb. The mirror does not lie, it remembers. They taught that reflection was the essence of self-knowledge. To study one's reflection was to study the past choices that shaped the present. When later civilizations discovered optics and physics, These teachings survived as parables about awareness. The mirror was never a portal, it was introspection made visible. Strange looks into mirrors to glimpse other dimensions. The elders looked into them to glimpse themselves. And so the forbidden arts were never destroyed, they were simply renamed. Philosophy became myth, science became ritual, wisdom became story. But the keepers believed that when humanity again seeks balance, the arts would rise in plain sight, disguised as creativity and learning. In a sense, the modern world is rediscovering them. Meditation, rhythm therapy, geometry, sound healing. All echoes of the same original science of mind. The multiverse is not out there, it is within. Every possible world begins as a thought. The African masters taught. He who knows himself knows the worlds. They mapped the inner universe long before telescopes and star charts. Each vision, each proverb, each drumbeat was a coordinate in that map. So when you see Doctor Strange tracing fiery circles, remember the circles drawn in sand by generations of thinkers and dreamers. Maps not of magic, but of meaning. Africa's so-called sorcerers were the first philosophers of perception. Their spells were disciplines. Their miracles were metaphors for insight.